Greetings and welcome to our friends and colleagues in the United States and across Europe. My name is Damir Marušić. I'm Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Europe Center, working on the Balkans Forward initiative. I'm very pleased to welcome you today to a very timely discussion titled The Path Ahead for Regional Integration Initiatives in the Western Balkans. When our Atlantic Council Balkans team was in Berlin in October of this year, a few days before the successful relaunch of the Berlin process, we hit on the idea to convene a virtual event after it was done to take the temperature of where things stand, but also to start charting the course for next steps from a transatlantic perspective. Around 2 weeks ago, we hosted a virtual discussion with Deputy Assistant Secretary Gabriel Escobar on this very topic, and I dare say I walked away fairly optimistic. Today, we're continuing this conversation with three distinguished colleagues from Europe. We have with us Manuel Sarazin, Germany's Special Representative for the countries of the Western Balkans, Ms. Tanja Miščević, Serbia's Minister for European Integration, and Ditmir Bušati, former Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Albania. From our perspective in Washington, these last two summits, both in Berlin and then again in Tirana, feel like they have meaningfully moved the needle in showing renewed seriousness on the part of European leaders to push for the inclusion of the region in Europe. But questions still remain. What is the pace of integration? Will so-called staged accession and the development of a common regional market succeed? Is there political will on the part of applicants to do the necessary reforms in order to become full members? Will Europe be able to reform itself to make good on its promise of offering full membership to the applicant countries? And what other unforeseen roadblocks remain? Mr. Sarazin, let me turn to you first. You worked really tirelessly on getting the Berlin Process Summit on track, and your Chancellor and Foreign Minister have committed themselves to making progress in the Western Balkans to make that a reality. Can you give us a sense of how you rate the recent summitry? Has momentum been restored?
Well, you have to be aware of that we are in Central Northern Europe, especially me. I mean, Dietmar and Tanja, they're in the south, but it's December. Today it's a bit sun, but the days are really short and everybody getting a bit depressed. Yeah. So I wouldn't overrate the December mood, but I would say it in the way we see in the current situation regarding Kosovo and Serbia. Also, in some other situation that, perhaps we managed out to create the Berlin process as something like, even when parents have a clash or they might be divorced, they would still like to lovely care together for that one. So I think that the Berlin process can have a momentum, but we have to stick to it. But of course, it's in the way that what's happening right now, I would have hoped that this positive atmosphere and spirit would have brought a bit more results also in other hot topics. But nevertheless, there will be January and perhaps better chances to come. And some people are also still believing that we can make things in summer. So I would say let's stay positive on that, but let's also stick to the idea to make small steps sometimes, make them really. And I think both summits developed that with the Common Regional Markets Agreement, but also with the roaming fee agreement, for example, done in Tirana, to be concrete, do something concrete. This will, in the end, prevail.
Yeah, I thought, on the tangible things, I also thought the gesture about Erasmus Plus was a very good gesture coming in Tirana. Minister Miščević, how did the summits look to you from Serbia? Does Serbia feel like it's closer to realizing its ambitions for joining the EU?
First of all, good to be with you. Well, actually, as Mr. Sarazin noticed, the very good development in terms of the two summits in very short period of time, with the tangible results being the three agreements under the auspices of the common regional market, as well as the roaming deal with the operators. And a very good development in terms of discussion during the summit in Tirana has been overshadowed with the situation that we are having right now. It's not only the issue between Belgrade and Pristina, it's the issue of observing and following very closely to the fulfillment of the obligations that has been taken, which is actually what we are talking about. So this is those climax and anticlimax in the Western Balkans, which are so often very present. So each and every day, the both things can happen, positive and negative in that respect. That's why it's extremely important to have the positive idea of the European integration as a goal, strategic goal, but also to hold on to the Berlin process and other initiatives in terms of trying to find out to fill the moment until we become members of the European Union, filled with the positive developments, with mutual work and understanding, which is extremely important. And I do agree, even with the small steps, but numerous small steps, and even to start discussing how to develop some of the ideas. I'm sure that Damir, you will remember I am proponent of going deeper and discussing the new negotiating methodology that could help in developing some of the moments or the developments for our progress into the European integration process. It's a tricky, especially it's a very difficult situation that we are facing, but now as a representative of the government of Serbia, we call for peace, which is the most important thing in terms of solving some of the issues that we are facing.
Thank you. Mr. Bushati, from your perspective, I guess the same question. Prime Minister Edi Rama, I feel like did a terrific job hosting the EU Western Balkans Summit in Tirana. At least on the surface, the spirits were very high and there was goodwill flowing everywhere. And Prime Minister himself, I feel, was more optimistic than usual in his statements vis-a-vis the EU. Do you share the Prime Minister's enthusiasm, and any reactions to Mr. Sarazin and Minister Miščević's remarks so far?
Thank you, Damir, and let me thank you for inviting me at this panel. After a period of stagnation in relation to the EU accession process of the Western Balkan countries, of course, the summit that was held in Tirana was a symbolic gesture. Before that, we have seen a renewed engagement of EU and more specifically of Germany in the region. And this corresponded a lot with the Russian aggression in Ukraine. So we have witnessed the first visit of Chancellor Scholz in 3 capitals of the region, and this was accompanied also by the visit of President Steinmeier in Skopje and in Tirana. Certainly we have benefited a lot during this period of time also from the presence of Manuel Sarazin, who has been quite often traveling from one capital to another, showing a sense of urgency also from the German perspective about the regional cooperation, regional reconciliation process, and the EU accession process of the region. So this is a positive news after a long period of stagnation. To answer your question, nowadays optimism is luxury. Pessimism is a weapon that brings us nowhere. So we have to be realists, and we have to work for realistic solutions that could bring our region closer to the EU. If you would speak with a friend in Thessaloniki in 2003, and if you would say that in 20 years' time, don't worry, you will have a summit that will take place in Tirana, that would not be a good scenario for the Western Balkans. But considering what we have gone through during the last 5 years, where we have seen an enlargement pause, this was certainly a very good step. The renewed engagement that we have seen in the framework of the Berlin process and the personal involvement of Chancellor, and also the fact that Germany nowadays has designated a special envoy to deal with the region. It's a good sign. It's a good sign for the region. You mentioned some of the most important agreements that have been concluded so far. But then again, when we compare to what's going on nowadays in relation between Serbia and Kosovo, or if we refer to the political situation in Montenegro, or other bids of the Western Balkan countries, we have to bear in mind that we are far from where we should be and from where we should aim.
Mr. Sarrazin, I share your approach about small steps building to something. The capstone project of the Berlin process. I mean, I think you'd agree with that characterization is getting the common regional market. The 3 agreements that were signed. How does implementation look to you right now? I mean, we can talk more about the current acute crisis between Serbia, Kosovo. I mean, we've seen, I think, unhelpful noises coming from Mr. Dodik in Bosnia as well about Kosovo and about sort of, I think, not directly replying to what was signed in Berlin, but in general, just sort of rhetoric in that regard. That, I mean, what would you say that implementation of the 3 signed agreements is looking like right now? What should we be concentrating on next to make sure that implementation happens? And what are next steps, would you say?
Well, I had the feeling that before the Berlin summit, we got a momentum that everybody wanted to be helpful. And suddenly it was in the way that, you got emails like, yeah, we already did the government procedure. And then the next one, yeah, we also like ready to be first with that. And this applied also for the IS position within BIH, from my understanding. So my feeling is that everybody has an interest and the reason and the history with the process, which is positive. With the Berlin process, with the CIM, but also with the last summit. So I would count on that. And then I hope that soon we will start with seeing ratification taking place. And if in any place anybody needs some support or some, acknowledgement of that, everybody of us will of course help. And then implementation has to take place, which is not least important. And of course, it will not be easy at any place. We'll manage it, and we will try to, if problems occur, to trust again on the spirit of the process, positive, and also to agree on that. I mean, we had a signing from Kosovo and Serbia on that. So obviously, you don't have to put all conflicts on the table for this process. You can put conflicts to the side. Disappear because of that. I think my picture with the divorced parents still caring for the child is perhaps a bit fitting to this. Of course, we will hope that Kosovo and Serbia will soon be in a position to be more close than before instead of.
Well, Minister Meštrović, can you then tell us? I mean, do we need to see? I think what's characterized so far the two summits has been actually increased engagement among leaders across the West. Especially I think Germany has leaned into it, and then from Brussels as well. Do you feel like the messaging you're getting of attention, on the transatlantic sphere, is everyone aligned on this? And what more needs to be done to, I guess, push a lot of these agreements over the line, taking into account the problems that are persistent in Serbia and Kosovo, but even more broadly in the region? What do we need to get these agreements over the line?
Well, there was, as Mr. Saracen said before the very summit, a very good atmosphere in negotiating and getting into the to the three agreements, but it was not easy, and he can tell a lot of stories that he had to travel all around the region from the back and forth in order to forge the agreement. But once when the draft agreements has been agreed, then really all in the region actually acknowledge the text of those documents, which means it is a bureaucratic way of explaining things, but that means that behind that, the whole structures of how how those agreements will be implemented has endorsed them, and that is a positive way of going through the story. Of course, the best possible way of proving the validity of the agreements, but also the added value of the agreements, is to start using them in terms of start recognizing the diplomas and the qualifications and start traveling all around. The best issue or the best visibility will be traveling from Sarajevo to Pristina without visas. That's the proof of the value of the really value of the agreements. But what also, as somebody who followed very closely the preparation for the Berlin summit, I can tell is the close transatlantic ties in reaching those agreements. Not only a few months before the very summit, but some time. Let me remind you that we had a stalemate in terms of signing those agreements for a year and a half. So the support and work, joint work in that respect was for a very long time. But the decisive moment was once the government has been established in Germany after the elections, and of course the decision of the new chancellor to take the leading part within the Berlin process. Berlin process is the initiative which now has its own ownership in the region, in the Western Balkans. But on the other hand, to have somebody as Germany leading the process on behalf of the EU member states is actually extremely important thing. It's not only the forum, but also the instrument. And that is extremely important for all of us to understand. The instrument for trying to solve the issues that might jeopardize normal functioning of all of us living in the Western Balkans. Of course, not only that we have the Berlin process, but also other initiatives. We can, of course, discuss with them about them a little bit later. But again, each and every initiative of the good cooperation, even integration in the region, means a lot.
I mean, it's a good segue to actually talk about that a little bit. I guess Mr. Mišović, since you brought it up, how do you see the Open Balkan initiative going forward next? There's some momentum there as well, but I think in the midst of all of this summitry, it's not clear which way things are going. What's next there, do you think?
Well, actually, I would like to use exactly Berlin summit to say that having Open Balkans and the Berlin process is not something which creates a collision. Quite contrary, it's a different type of format, but not a different type of initiative in terms of the end goal that has to be achieved. What is going to happen until the end of the year? There's supposed to be very soon a next meeting again. I think it's supposed to be in Tirana until the end of the year to discuss what are the next steps to be taken, especially having in mind those three agreements signed in Berlin.
Mr. Bushati, you've been critical, I think, of Open Balkan and the sort of competitive nature of these things. Do you see that now that Berlin process is, making progress at 6. Is there a problem that 3 and maybe 4 are pushing ahead and sort of as a vanguard? I mean, the French always talk about multi-speed Europe. Can we have a multi-speed Western Balkans? Does that make sense?
My main concern is about the sense of direction of the region. And I remember quite vividly 2014 when we were invited to go to Berlin, and most of us were afraid that the Berlin process could be used or could be seen as an alternative platform to the EU membership. And the Berlin process has been launched a few months after Jean-Claude Juncker basically presented his program in the European Parliament, where he mentioned that there won't be enlargement within the term of his presidency, and he was so decent to be honest to all of us. So personally, I've seen Berlin process as a kind of anti-depression pill because the sense of frustration in the region was quite high. When we discuss about regional initiatives, I would like to point out the fact that we might have more than 70 or 75 regional initiatives that are going on under different formats in the region. When we discuss about Southeast European cooperation process, for instance, this is one of the first initiatives where you could see a real regional ownership at full display. So, and then there are different kinds of formats where you have trilaterals, quadrilaterals. It's important to ensure the inclusiveness of any initiatives, and to have also a real sense of direction. You were asking a little bit before about the 3 agreements that were finally concluded under the framework of the Berlin process. We are not lacking agreements in the region, and we are not lacking laws. So we are having an inflation in terms of laws or agreements. Our main point is the level of implementation of the agreement. And I don't believe that there will be too many doctors going from Tirana to Belgrade or from Belgrade to Tirana, because they are looking towards Germany, because they are much more paid in Germany. And I don't think nurses from Tirana will go to Sarajevo or from Sarajevo to Pristina, because they are looking towards Germany again. So, but the political value of these agreements under the framework of the Berlin process is to bring people together, to ease tensions, to ease certain stereotypes, and to start, let's say, helping us prepare becoming EU members. So this is the main point. Whether you call it Berlin process or Berlin Plus, as Sigmar Gabriel wanted to call it few years ago, or open or closed Balkan or Schengen, I don't know. The most important thing to me is the sense of direction. And again, when we discuss about Berlin process, we know that the political and financial instruments are very limited. But the real essence of the Berlin process lies at the fact that all participants in the Berlin process are on the same footing. So they can use their own symbols, they consider themselves as being equal. If we manage to have these kinds of initiatives under different names, I think it would be okay. Whether we need more initiatives, I really don't know right now.
Mr. Sarrazin, a question for you, very broadly on the same line, but let me just tweak it a little bit. When we had Mr. Escobar on 2 weeks ago, we posed the question basically whether there's any cross purposes between how the United States is approaching, and specifically, whether there was any tension between Open Balkan and the Berlin process. He emphatically said no, that is not the case. Do you feel that Berlin and Brussels and the United States and Washington are basically on the same page on this, that there's a sense of common purpose for the region? Or is there more synchronization that needs to happen transatlantically to be more effective?
I think the summit in November could only be successful because everybody was on the same page, and the result was also beneficial for everybody. And we were closely cooperating with the Commission, with the RCC, with the EES, and I always knew that US is behind that in favor. And I think this is giving us an example how to reach things on the region. And the other point is, when the team is successful, you never have a problem that a good player is sitting on the bench. But when the team is not successful, then he might be upset. So I would say we shouldn't have a problem with having strong open Balkans sitting on the bench and asking for the first squad as long as we are delivering on the pitch. And it's not a problem for the region when it's going on. To be frank, I think, there was a lot of theoretical debate on open Balkans and Berlin process. And my idea was to say like, hey, guys, let's not talk about each other too much. Let's everybody trying to deliver. Yeah, and then we see what's the results. And then let's wage it. And let's always be pro-European, pro-Commission, pro-acquis, pro-regional cooperation, and having this general idea which Sigmund just said. All participating parties are equal in this process. And if then people want more, because I also strongly believe, there's a lot of theories about open Balkans. Of course, it was an idea because we were not delivering enough. So to a certain extent, being against this project was like shooting the messenger, but not tackling the problem. I wouldn't say that I always trust all of this stuff, but let's stick to the papers. And as long as the paperwork is fitting to each other, which I in the moment see, why should it be a problem? And it's clear that we all integrated, from my sense, in the common regional market. So let's not spend too much time and money and brain work in open Balkan and Berlin process and how could it theoretically be. Let's try to spend this time for delivering. And also, I think that the guys from Open Balkans showed us one thing, how to create and deliver political will. I think it was important that we were able to bring back political will also to the common regional markets. In the moment, I think we have really reached something there. We don't have to love both projects, they don't have to merge, but they can beneficially to each other work. We don't have even to have the same opinions about it, but we can have the same conclusions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sarzin. So on political will, I think that's it's an excellent point. Minister Miščević, can you tell us, do you feel like there is sufficient political will for reforms? Because that's the other part about getting over the line on full European membership. Do you feel like there's now that the positive momentum, and let's again leave the Belgrade-Pristina debate aside, because I do want to return to that a little bit later about the true dangers there. But is there political will also among the Serbian public at this point? Because we've all seen the polls of public support waning. Can there be sort of thoroughgoing reforms to really start closing more chapters and move forward for Serbia?
But unfortunately, the debate here in Serbia is not about the reforms, opening of the chapters or clusters, but the discussion of what is going on all around us, which means the problems on the north of Kosovo, the issue of Serbs leaving the institutions or people being arrested there. So you can imagine that it will be very difficult now to discuss the possibilities to open the cluster for of the negotiation process. And that is also, that is what we saw even before with a lot of discussion, but also disinformation regarding the Russian influence here, the Russia Today or Sputnik being registered and licensed here. So those are the type of things that we have to discuss and explain here. And that is the major problem for the connecting the reform process in Serbia with the European integration process. And it's going to remain like this, but there is a will, political will, and the political wish not only to go deeper into the reforms, which is one of the main issues that I am dealing since I was appointed a month and a half ago. My honest and first-hand experience for this month and a half is the readiness to read the annual report, country report, progress report of the European Commission, and to go through the recommendations in order to pick up where we were late, but also to speed up the necessary reforms, starting with the rule of law. And of course, with the emphasis on the judicial reforms, implementation of the constitutional amendments, as well as the implementation of the media strategy, fight against corruption, but also going deeper into the issues of trade, environmental protection, and especially energy. So there is political will, there is a push within the society for this, but as I try to explain to you, discussion about the reforms, the potentials, the problems, or the challenges is less visible than obvious things which are less than bread and butter, but more security-wise issues.
Mr. Bushati, question for you, very similar. I mean, you can speak to the whole region, but I'm also curious about Albania, where you have, basically the start of the accession negotiations. Still, the judiciary reforms, I've seen reports they've stalled in some ways. What is the political will in Albania? But also, feel free to comment more broadly on the kind of momentum required for the kind of reforms to make accession a reality.
When it comes to Albania, certainly EU accession process is a national priority shared across political spectrum, and there is no political party or no political group that would object this trajectory of the country. But I'm certain we need to connect more this process with bread and butter policy, because people don't eat chapters. People don't eat intergovernmental conferences, and sometimes it's and people don't eat certainly benchmarks. So it's sometimes difficult to explain to the ordinary citizens the nitty-gritties of these process. I'm worried about the continuation of this process if there is no predictable timetable for the Western Balkan countries, because next year it will be 20 years after Thessaloniki summit, and we know that only Croatia managed to join European Union from the region, and next year Croatia is going to join Euro and Schengen area, and we are happy that one of our neighbors succeeded. But on the other hand, it shows also that the gap between the neighbors being members of European Union and us is not being bridged. It's being widened. So in this respect, it is key for EU to consider a timetable for the Western Balkans, to work more closely also with other layers of society, not limiting the cooperation only at the political and government level, in order to create the push from the society and to motivate the agents of change in the society for the necessary reforms and also for improving the local ownership on the reform process, then in some cases it is lacking. Three key elements I see it, very much related to the success of this endeavor. First, rule of law related reforms, and we know that they are quite dear to EU. Although EU is struggling itself, we see countries that are under, let's say, rule of law mechanism procedures, so which somehow questions also the ability of the EU to project success in the neighborhood, in this case in its own backyard in Southeast Europe. The second is we need more transfers from the EU budget. So we need to be shown more solidarity from EU to our neighborhood if we want to somehow bridge the development gap that is existing between us and European Union. And the third component, which is very much related to the second one, is the threat of depopulation that is present in our neighborhood, and it is very difficult to convince youngsters to stay and build Europe at home when they see their peers in Germany or in Netherlands or in Denmark or in other European countries, and where they can build their success there. So our real challenge will be to build Europe here by having a predictable time frame for joining EU. And certainly this needs to be connected with a set of reforms. Chancellor Scholz mentioned for the very first time the term acceleration of the EU accession process with Western Balkan countries. This has been inserted also in the Tirana Declaration, which I see it as a step forward compared to Brdo, Zagreb, and Sofia Declaration. But now it's time to materialize it.
Mr. Sarrazin, a follow-up, I guess, very much on those lines, and maybe call it a two-pronged follow-up. On the one hand, acceleration of ambition for enlargement. But again, Chancellor Scholz has echoed Mr. Macron in saying that, of course, the European Union itself has to do reforms internally. How likely is that to happen to be able to provide the kind of meaningful timeframe that Mr. Bushati is talking about? And then on the other hand, there's carrots on the one hand, but always this process is carrots and sticks. How likely do you think sanctions are, in the future as a tool for fighting corruption existing in the region? Or is now not the time to talk about that as we sort of try and build positive momentum? How do you see this?
I think in general, using sanctions can also create a positive momentum. It's just obvious that this instrument is more difficult to be available if you have to agree amongst 27 about that fact. On the other hand, it is really central that we have one European sanction mechanism and policy. I mean, imagine you would have 27. So I would say that there's a bit of different approach, perhaps from the US or from the UK. And perhaps sometimes it might be not in the individual case, like shared or not the consensus in the European Union on that. But in general, they can also be part of being more clear and more honest on our own values. Regarding the time frame, the credible time frame. So good, to find a credible time frame. I would propose that until we find credible time frame, we start working already, because it might take some years of discussing the right time frame before we get becoming it credible. So, as I usually say, in such a momentum in European politics, I'm a believer in the Schuman method, which is solidarity of action, and not so much the one big plan after which Europe will be drawn. I understand the pledge from the region that we should be more credible in the time frame, and the region should be even more credible also in delivering reforms even earlier than the timetables set.
Well, so we're coming up on the sort of last bit here. You know, we haven't really spent that much time, though it's come up several times, talking about the crisis between well in northern Kosovo right now. How, I guess, a question for all of you. What do you see next steps on this, Mr. Sarrazin? Let's start with you. You know, how's Germany approaching this? You know, basically, is there an off ramp that you see in the immediate term to ease tensions?
Yeah, I mean, Kosovars used some off ramps, perhaps under some major pressure also from our side. I think we need to organize security and state institutions for the people living in the north, whatever is their passport, ethnicity, thinking, feeling, whatever. And for that, we need to say clearly we want the Serbian Kosovars coming back to the institution. And of course, it's important to use this crisis as a chance, typical American way, Damir, right? For bringing the debates on the dialogue further. There's also the proposal, the European proposal presented by Mr. Lajczak, Mr. Borrell, and the advisor of Mr. Chancellor and Mr. President. Yeah, this is also a chance to show that instead of this digging each other holes and falling in it with all of the region, perhaps, we can create a positive state. The first thing is, I think, trying to be clever in tactics, sovereign in decisions. This is it, I think.
Minister Mišević, is this an opportunity, like Mr. Sarrazin says, to you know, use this crisis opportunity, sort of cliche, to get to a better place?
It's always possibility to do that, but for this you need also all sides to be entangled into trying to find a good solution. For some time now, and that is the reason why Serbs left the institution, is that they explained that their voices has not been heard. What are the next steps that will be taken? Is actually this week will be devoted. Good part of this week will be devoted for the shuttle diplomacy of the representatives of the European Union, but also some of the member states as well as the United States. So I hope that I'm not participating directly into the dialogue, but I do hope, as this is extremely important for people living in our region, regardless of the statehood issue, it is important to try to find out the way out, which will exactly be to use the crisis as an opportunity and to go further with the good developments.
Mr. Bushanti, same question to you. Crisis opportunity. Can Albania play a role also? I mean, can the region play a role in solving a bilateral issue that has been plaguing the region for so long?
First, on Albania, it's a very tricky question because at the end of the day, we are the same nation, and everyone knows our position when it comes to Kosovo. The way how I've seen Europe and our corner of Europe, especially after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, was a bit different from what's happening nowadays. And the first moves of Serbia at the UN level, when it condemned the Russian invasion and when it joined the votes with the West, were in my opinion, in my humble view, quite promising. But then seeing 8 or 9 rounds or waves of packages of sanctions within EU, and hearing Serbian president last week in Tirana saying quite openly that Serbia is not going to join the EU sanction, and declaring Russia still as a partner, as nothing has happened during these 8-9 months, and then switching also the last vote at the UN level, when Serbia refused to join the votes with others for holding Russia accountable for crimes committed in Ukraine. It is not certainly a welcomed development in the region, and it is not a welcoming development also if one takes into account the bitter past of our region. So the main point here is how to move forward, and we have seen some, let's say, historical developments have been missed even from the part of EU, and I'm referring here to the deal or to the Prespa agreement between North Macedonia and Greece, where North Macedonia was not rewarded at that moment, and this has been, I suppose, a bitter lesson for other actors that need to engage into a meaningful dialogue process that will be followed also with some painful concessions for sure. So in this respect, we may debate and discuss about different regional economic initiatives, but at the end of the day, it's all about political trajectory and the choice we are making. Before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I have seen European integration process of the region as a political choice. Now I see it as a necessity. I don't see it anymore as a political choice. Before Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think the perception of European in relation to Western Balkan was that connected to the geographical border. Now we have to consider that this perception has moved from our neighborhood to the eastern part of European Union. So whether we will seize this geopolitical moment and whether we will look into our commonalities and in order to join European Union, this certainly remains to be seen. But it is important also how we educate voters, because if we brainwash voters on daily basis and if we stick to nationalistic positions, regardless whether we sit in Tirana, in Mitrovica, in Novi Sad, or in Banja Luka, then we will always use this as a scapegoat for not delivering and saying that, you know, people are not supporting this and that approach. So we need to work with each other, and we need also to engage citizens in this process, as the level or the model of governance in our societies is still top-down one.
Yeah, I wanted really to say a few words because this is a common mistake that we are getting into when discussing relationship or solving the issues between Belgrade and Pristina, and of course, including the story of Serbia not aligning with the EU sanctions. With the EU sanctions to Russia, of course. So why this is a usual excuse? Because actually, and Dmitry is aware of this, is not only one resolution within the UN, it's many of them, including the decision on the Council of Europe and Russia and the position of Russia there. It's many of UN General Assembly decisions. It's many of the decisions and the declarations from the High Representative. but not 9 package of sanctions, because there is no possibility to pick and choose. Once when you agree with one of the decision of any of those packages, then you accept the whole package, all 9 of them. And do not forget that even our oil industry is then under sanctions if something like this happens. But on the other hand, aligning with the CFSP, I know that Ditmir knows that, as he knows a lot about the chapters, is not the only part of the common foreign and security policy. There are so many things that constitute aligning in that respect. So Serbia is not non-aligned when we are talking about war in Ukraine. We know where are our preferences and what is our strategic decision. Our strategic decision is once to become member of the European Union, before that, of course, to establish a good cooperation, healthy relation and integration with our neighbors.
Mr. Sarrazin, any final thoughts on getting us to this? Through this next period. I mean, specifically on the geopolitics in Russia, are you concerned about this being a front that's going to be opened up? Meddling in the region to cause headaches for Europe?
Well, I would say we can be open to each other. I'm not really satisfied with the Serbian position on that. But I think at least this is a new point of honesty between the European Union and Serbia, that it's clear that we have different positions on that. I think personally that, there's a chance for the Serbian leadership to try to explain to their own people better. Serbia is not only pro-Russian, as some see, but also pro-Ukrainian. And to talk more about the Ukrainian view and the Ukrainian people, and the Ukrainian suffer, and to open the minds more, because I think that the hearts of the people in Serbia are open for Ukraine as well. So I would say that this is a chance which can be used or missed by the leadership in Serbia. But I have to be clear, I hoped and expected more, and I don't stop hoping and expecting more.
Well, that's, I think, a good place to end this. Really, thank you, all three. Thank you for your time and your candid answers and this candid exchange. As we approach the end of the year, we here at the Atlantic Council wish all three of you, as well as our audience in Europe and the United States, a very happy holiday season and a successful 2023 ahead. Do follow us on Twitter at AC Europe to keep up with everything we're up to next year. And thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wish you all the best. Bye-bye.
Hvala, faleminderit.
Hvala. Thank you, guys. Faleminderit.
Faleminderit. Bye.
Bye-bye.